Hi, it's good to be here. When Gordon asked me to do this talk, I said no about, 15, 16 times. Finally, he persevered so much, which is a word I'll touch on later. I said yes, and had a hard time saying no to a guy with such a great smile. So here I am. I don't really like forums like this, to be honest. I'm really more of a smaller group style leader, and more one-on-one is really where I feel like I excel, so bear with me on this. I could go through all that, a little bit of what Gordon said, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. It's not me talking about my resume. It's really talking, I think, first about the fact that I started as an intern, so if there's anybody here in the audience, looks like more of an, don't take this the wrong way, but it looks like a little older audience than younger. But if there is anyone here that is trying to get in the industry, if I can do it, you can do it. Started as an intern, had very much of an art track, went into production, and I'm now running the studio that I was fortunate enough to be a founder of back in 2000. I think a lot of this is circumstantial for me. I'll say it probably later on if I remember to. I want to say it now just in case I forget. I would not be anywhere near where I am today professionally, up on this stage, much less with credits in a game, without the team and the people and the dedication of the group that I've been so fortunate to surround myself by for many years. Some of them are sitting here in the audience. These are some of the games I've been part of, whether it's been art direction or production. The size of the actual game box is the level of influence that I had. So as you can see, Twisted is a little bit smaller up there, and that's because I wasn't part of that team day to day, but I supported it as an executive producer. A little bit about Sony Santa Monica. We built the studio ground up. A picture at the top left is what the studio looked like when we were first walking into the facility. A very exciting time to be part of a studio development team and building a first-party studio from scratch. Again, very fortunate. It's all about timing in my world, and we are now basically looking like the bottom shot, just hustle bustle of crazy product development. So these are some of the games that we've lined up over the course of many years. We're all very proud of what we've been able to accomplish and the quality titles that we put out to the general public on a regular basis. Very big mix of games up there. Some of that's kind of frontline box product. You'll see the God of War series, all the way into Flower and Flow and what will soon be released, Journey. So I thought I would talk a little bit about leadership, and there's a lot of different topics about this, but there's a lot of different styles that I thought I would touch on initially and then kind of roll a little bit into my style, which is my style, and I'm not up here trying to dictate to you your style, but simply informing you of my experiences, what I've seen over the course of almost 20 years, and you know, the ins and outs of hoping to inspire you to think about who you want to be as a leader on a day-to-day basis inside your studio or simply managing your team. So as I mentioned, I'm kind of standing away from the podium, so I'm not looking like that character. I'm also very short, so I didn't think people would be able to see me behind this. Styles. I've learned a lot about styles of leadership through, I kind of left Sony for a bit. I went into EA, a couple of the places that Gordon said, and I was really giving myself an opportunity to be exposed to a lot of different people, a lot of different ways of doing things, and a lot of different perspectives. And through that, I've experienced outside a lot of styles of leadership, but also inside of Sony. And these are some of the things that, you know, I feel like, you know, I've identified for myself that I want to stay away from as a leader on a day-to-day basis. I don't want anything to do with talking down to my creatives. And when I say creatives, I'm talking about everybody in the studio. Even though you're a producer, in my mind, you're a creative. You're out there problem solving schedules and looking at what works and what doesn't work for your creative team. So please understand, as I use that moving forward, I mean the entire team. And arguments, I really, you know, we all have the productive, healthy argument, and that's great. But, you know, I really don't like to work with people that are going head to head and yelling and screaming and bringing a bunch of drama into the environment. That's the type of stuff that, you know, I really want to push down and smash as quickly as possible in working with new people or a new team. Indecisiveness is really bad in creative development. It sucks the morale away. So that can happen on a creative end. It can also happen from the producer. This wave, you're going to get seasick and you're going to lose people. So I try to be as decisive as possible. And this doesn't mean that I'm out there making all the decisions. Oftentimes I reach out to the group that I feel most confident in, that might know a different perspective that could inform me of things that I'm not aware of. So that indecisiveness is something that I think, for me, I really consistently try to stay away from. There's a level of demand that I think you can do to a certain extent, kind of in a way that's not obviously that you're demanding. You're kind of convincing, or you're enticing different, or something a little bit new. So the demanding leader, I do not want to be known for, and I don't want to mislead people. I really want to try to make the best decisions possible as I move and support the team through the challenges and chaos of production. I also don't want to be put on a pedestal. Oftentimes it's difficult for me to be in the role that I'm in. I come from Alan Becker, who started Sony Santa Monica. He was the guy who found the support within Sony to actually build the studio from ground up. And he's Japanese, and he's very mellow and doesn't like to take a lot of you know, focus or attention away from the team. And I'm kind of the same way, which is why I told Gordon 25 times, no, I don't want to be up on the stage. But I feel like I have a responsibility to the studio, and I also feel like if I have something that I can possibly share that would enhance people who care, then, you know, I can give what I have. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things I focus on when I'm leading a team. Leading requires a lot of focus. For those of you who are leading right now or producing, when I say leading, I guess I'm talking more about discipline leads, if you're leading a group of animators or designers. And when I talk about producing, it's obviously producing big product or small product. So the focus of leadership is, for me, very exhausting. I think about my days kind of in the trench, day in, day out, supporting a team through to finaling a game. And it can really take its toll, and it depends a lot on who you're working with as well. As you know, God of War was, you know, Dave was the creative director, Dave Jaffe, on that title, and Dave's extremely demanding. So I think a lot of the focus that I had early on in my partnership with Dave was very much supporting him in his vision and trying to help the team to band and unite around that. And it seems like, you know, Dave's always pushing to raise the bar. And when you're in a situation like that, when you're trying to support and produce for him in that situation, you're chasing, it feels like, your tail. So the focus is really critical in making sure that the morale of the team doesn't feel like they're chasing their tail, right? So I'll talk a little bit about strategy as well. One of the main pieces of leading a team or discipline is establishing strategy and communicating that and the importance of that. If you don't have a strategy, you're going to spend a lot of time digging in deep holes and not finding your way out without any real, you know, you're going to be exhausted. The team's going to be exhausted. Even in early development, it's really critical to establish what your strategy is. And I know a lot of people are like, well, we don't know what the game is yet. It's like, okay, good, but what is your strategy for today? What is your goal for today? Let people know that so that they can make a baby step and feel like they've made some, they've accomplished something at the end of the week or at the end of the day. Lack of strategy can be blind leading the blind, which you don't want. You want to be able to give people guidance. People are on a team and people have decided not to be leaders because they want to be led. So it's really critical for me that I identify those people who want that leadership, and I go out of my way to give it to them if they don't have what they feel like they need, especially if they're contributing at a high level. And then you get chaos, right? People don't know what's going on. They're bumping into each other and not really moving things along as they need to. I think, defining strategy is really critical when you want to have a variety of your leads or key leadership defining targets, right? Sony Santa Monica were really a very collaborative development team. That's one of the pillars of the studio. And we oftentimes have some of the more senior people establishing targets that are very different from each other. And that's great on one hand because you get to see kind of two different perspectives. What our job as leaders are in Sony Santa Monica is to bring and align those targets and make sure that everybody's perspective is being at least taken into consideration and heard as we merge the vision and move the strategy forward. As I mentioned earlier, even if you don't know what your game is, simple strategy is important. This little guy is trying to explain why swimming around in circles is important, and sometimes it is. Sometimes when you're in prototyping stage, you got to do things over and over and over in order to really realize the value of the engine, the technology, the art group, what have you. Leadership oftentimes requires kind of the management of time, and that's kind of difficult. It's always a struggle in creative development to be on time, it seems. Time is really money, right? So when we're out there looking at how much time you have left, you're basically talking about money. And it's kind of unfortunate on one hand because I think all probably in this room really value creative development. Certainly at Sony Santa Monica, we cherish it. And we really wish we had the time to make every product the best it can be. I guess the producer in me also feels to be fair that would mean you would never ship a game because it's like an art piece, it's never done. It's a money-driven business. We all know time is money, and we oftentimes struggle to ask for more time. And once you do, that's how I felt on God of War 1 when I asked for $1.5 million more to finish the game, and I felt like a loser, You're trying to move a AAA product forward, but no one knows it's there. No one realized the vision. No one was able to really see what the game was going to be once it released because you're so early on in development. This was around the E3 timeline. And I remember Shuhei Yoshida at the time, who was heading up WWSA, which is Worldwide Studios America. Shu's now running all of Worldwide Studios for Sony. He basically said to me, your career's on the line, so you better make this thing happen. Keep in mind, myself and the few members of the team were managing Dave Jaffe. Is Dave in the audience, by the way? I should probably filter myself a little bit. So no easy task, but part of leadership, which I'll touch on later, is courage. And I asked for the money, got the money, and I think you guys know the outcome of that one. So time management is the other piece of time. So you can ask for more time, but then we've got to get in there and we've got to make sure that every aspect of that time is being utilized in the most efficient fashion. That's another piece of leadership is watching the efficiencies of your team. I feel like I do that a lot, and that's kind of where, as I sat back and thought about this talk, what I wanted to think about, I looked at Management 101 books and how could I parlay some of my management experience into a talk and from management books, and it's, I just was, for many weeks like, I didn't know what to talk about. And I really took a minute to reflect and thought about what I felt I brought to product development. And my grandfather, I found out years ago, worked at Ford, working on developing more efficiencies for the Ford, I want to say pipeline, but it's not pipeline, it's the RT-D2 is here? So it's not pipeline, what is it called when you make cars? assembly line. And I thought about that this was probably 2-3 years ago, and I was like, wow, that's really crazy, because that's what I feel I do pretty consistently at the team level, running a development team, where I'm constantly talking to people about the tools that they're developing, the pipeline, the way they're communicating. So that all goes back to time management and the way that, you know, I guess I've inherited a little bit of that in my genes that allows me to constantly push the bar on how can we be more effective in the studio. So again, I kind of understood that this would be a bit of a mixed group, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some stuff that maybe a large subset of you guys already know, but maybe the cute cartoons will keep you awake. So I watch out for a lot of things in leadership, and I feel like, and that's kind of where I talked earlier about, you know, just it takes a lot of focus, because it's not just about, is the game moving forward? You got to worry about a lot of aspects, and a lot of what I'll highlight today is, for me, foundation of what I look at and look for and watch out for. I think silo development is one of those things. I think early on in my career, I saw a lot of this. You know, I think it was probably due to a lot of the kind of quote-unquote garage-style gaming that we all came from. We had engineers working in a garage doing art and sound and everything. I feel like we kind of need to move more away from this, and we have in Sony Santa Monica. It's all about collaboration, as I mentioned earlier. It's a pillar. We do have people that kind of do silo development still today. Back in the day when we were producing God of War, Tim Moss and I, Tim's now the technical director of Sony, and we had an engineer that wanted to come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and leave at 2. And you know, when we looked at the value of that individual and the fact that he really wasn't out there on the ground, you know, making things happen in the collaboration way, he was really working on a lot of tools that were kind of silo development until you start to interface with various other departments on the team. So we decided to give it a try. And this guy, Matt, came and went as he pleased within the time frame, and it worked. And today, Matt, as I roll into the parking lot, Matt's still with us, I roll in the parking lot about 8 o'clock every morning. His car's there, which means he's been there for already a couple of hours. So while I feel like our job is to be fair and across the board in the way that we manage our people, I think if you have special cases and people that kind of have the ability to be in silo production, or possibly the responsibility and maturity, I'll go out of my way to give the support to that situation. And I think, you know, I've been dealing a lot with HR recently for a number of different reasons. It would bore you, but I'm constantly hearing, well, it has to be fair amongst all the Sony Santa Monica, or all the studios within Sony. It's driving me crazy. It's like, no, you can't be unique and you can't be special if you want to treat everybody the same. So I think this is an example of that. Watch out for big fish. The little guys are important too. Little guys, I guess what I'm talking about here are the junior creatives or possibly interns. There's a dynamic that I think we've all seen in our lives one way or another, where you have somebody who's got some information and knowledge, they feel a little bit more powerful than the little guy. And for us, you know, we've got to protect the little guy, because one day that little guy is going to be driving a feature or driving a team. And if we don't embrace and really instill as much knowledge as we can into that person, we're cheating ourselves. Politics drive me crazy. I thought this was a really great image of, you know, vicious teeth. It's an energy suck. And, you know, the amount of time that potentially people could spend playing this game and not making a game is really detrimental to production. So this is something that, you know, you can't control this. This is human nature. But if I see it or if I hear about it, I'm always trying to work to hold it back and hold it down. Watch out for me management. I think this is kind of easy to get into. You've got a lot of responsibility, a lot of power, a lot of people under you. You're dealing with millions of dollars. Well, why not kick back and just talk about you all the time and how special you are? This is an aspect of management that I feel like you're dealing with a team, and the little guy on the right, doesn't feel so good coming into work every day because he doesn't feel like he matters. Everybody matters. I'm better than you. Healthy competition is great. We've got a group of artists at Sony that are phenomenal. And there's a healthy competition within that team. These guys are constantly going at who's got the best and most interesting looking level. And every aspect of level art within our engine is unique. And I don't know how many of you guys have played the game, but there's nothing that repeats, basically. So you've got a lot of time invested in every level out there, and these guys really look to enhance each other's levels as well as make their levels the best they can be. So that healthy competition, I believe, has really helped our team to become one of the most talented art teams in the world. So if you've got that healthy competition, embrace it. If you can build it, I think there's great value in that. Everybody's different on a team. And what I'm talking about here is not the way they look, but the way that they, just kind of their being and what they bring to the team dynamic. I think it's really critical for a leader to understand the individuals. And this is why, for me, when you start getting above 60, it becomes really challenging. You don't remember people's names, and the group comes maybe too big. So I think if you do need to grow above 60, you need to think about how are you going to maintain this. The sensibilities of everybody really does make a difference between the way the dynamic of the group functions, and do your best to handle that with care. Alienation can happen if you're not really, understanding who your group is and what they contribute. And if this sort of dynamic begins to take over your team, you're going to have a big separation between management and the actual guys that are making the game, and struggles can completely take over at that point. This is one that I think is kind of this is my own individual perspective. I think that observation of the dynamic of your team and your surroundings and even yourself, take the time to sit back and reflect a little bit. Think about your day, what you could have done differently or better. You can kind of trick yourself into thinking everything's fine, and there's no value in that. We're constantly striving for perfection, knowing that we're never going to get there, but it takes reflection in order to really look at the areas that you can improve on. Mediation. Ooh, this was, I don't know, I wish I could have put this on the box as a credit for God of War 1. We had a number of different, very fiery personalities that brought a great amount of experience and creativity to the series. But this was something that for at least one, God of War 2 wasn't as bad, but one was pretty bad in regards to two people, Tim Moss and Dave Jaffe. That's kind of been spoken about in a number of different talks throughout the past few years. These guys it feels like they talk different languages. They never aligned. But the value of what they bring is the fact that, Dave was fighting for what was best for the game and the end player. And I really cherish that in a creative director. Tim was fighting for what was best for technology and frame rate, which is also very critical to a game like God of War. So for me, it was constantly balancing these two guys and getting them to communicate in a fashion that we could move things forward. And there were days I felt like, I needed to hire a therapist for them, bring them in and get them to sit with them for 2 hours to align whatever piece of development we had for the game. It was extremely challenging for multiple people on the team. I can say on this, if you don't know how to mediate, if you don't have any real foundation or experience, there's courses out there. I would absolutely suggest you go out and take a course or two on the best way to move through challenging conversations. It's really beneficial to development. Too many cooks in the kitchen. I think, I don't need to elaborate on this. We have a single visionary philosophy at Sony Santa Monica. Creative development, there's one person that's driving the game creatively, and there's another person who's driving the game from a production perspective. In this case, what I'm speaking to is, we've had some people come into that creative director position, such as Corey Barlog. When he first started, he was really like, I'm so excited to be in this position, but I really want to involve the entire team in decision making. And I knew at that point that, excuse me, he's going to need to figure this out on his own. Like, I could have really said, nope, can't do that. Here's the way you need to make decisions. But there was little value to me handling it that way. So I really felt like Corey needed to try it that way, try to involve the team in all aspects of decision. I'm not talking about collaboration. I'm talking about driving decisions. And he came back, I guess it was 3 weeks later, and just was like, boy, that was the stupidest decision I've ever made. And now I know why you do things the way you do. And I think, it's a struggle oftentimes within creative development when you've got designers that are like, why does he get to make all the decisions? Why does, Corey Barlog get to have all the say in where we're going with our game? And, there's a balance there. And I think Corey lived in that camp for many months prior to being, when he was on God of War, prior to being the game director on God of War 2. And he was kind of one of the guys that was not so happy with the way that worked and wanted to change things. And when he landed in that position of creative director for 2, he was really able to see the value of that single visionary and how to work with the team to get the best out of himself, but also the best for the product. Oftentimes, these creative visionaries need creative management. Dave couldn't manage himself out of a brown paper bag. And we had Whitney Wade, who is now driving production for our next product out of Sony Santa Monica. She's a senior producer there. She was very much on Dave's hip for a long time, making sure that he was on track, making progress in whatever day-to-day activities that he was supposed to be involved in. And I'm surprised that she's still part of the studio today, because it was a non-stop, and it still is with him, working on Twisted. It's the same, like, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to be? And, again, if you're really looking to be the best producer you can be philosophically for at least us at Sony, you have to embrace this. You have to really understand the value of that person. They're not there to schedule. They're not there to dictate how money's going to be handled. They're there only to worry about what the vision of the game needs to be for the best of what they feel the end consumer is going to enjoy. Another piece of this for us is, again, there's that separation between production and creative vision. And we oftentimes have producers that come in, APs, assistant producers, and want to be creative. And, EA is kind of right down the street from us here in LA. And that's kind of the way they do things. I don't believe in it. I think it's backwards. I think, again, if you're a producer, you're really working to support the team. And we get people in that want to throw their 2 cents in. And what happens is you get a brainstorming session going, as an example. And if you have a producer sitting in the room, you might get kind of a junior guy that has a great idea going, oh, I don't want to share that idea because the producer's here and it's probably going to take too much time and too much money, and then she'll hate me, and then I won't ever be able to go on my 2-hour lunch break again. So they tend to hold their tongue a little bit. So we really work hard at Sony not to necessarily involve producers. We make very strategic decisions around who's in those brainstorming sessions. And again, not to sell Whitney up too much here, but she's somebody that you can put in a room with a group of creatives, and she's, one, immediately respected in that room, but she's also somebody that knows how to balance the discussion and not get in the way and not put too much barriers and not worry about, keeping it on track in a fashion that makes people nervous. So it's a real skill set to get into the creative discussions without becoming a blocker or a big black cloud sitting in the room, and you're not going to get the most out of your creative people. Crazy estimators, this is, you get people that kind of feel like they know how to manage their time and, deliverables. but they overestimate or they underestimate. And as a producer and as a leader, it's really important to know where this can go wrong on an individual basis if you can. If not, your APs or your producers really need to know this. You need to be able to schedule around this and work through it and know who those people are that are way off the, way off the boat in the way that they're casting their fishing line. Overthinkers and overplanners. We've had a few of these where people want to come in and really push through weeks of planning on a feature or something, and you just don't see any progress. If you've got an engine, forget about that. Don't sit on paper or on whiteboards. Do that for a few days, maybe. Really get some top-level goals, top-level strategy, and get moving on the actual hardware. And from there, move it forward. People who want to sit in a room and plan, it's just a bunch of talk. Ideally, yeah, you need to have some early brainstorming and some good creative discussions, but we've had producers that tend to want to get down into the nitty-gritty of everything, and it can be very, it turns into a very gray area. You get caught up in those types of details, you're wasting a bunch of time. So this says, watch out for the need to throw it away. And what I mean by that is, it's hard to do, and it's taken me many years to really understand this. You oftentimes need to throw things away, and you're, in a sense, throwing production away. You're throwing money away. You're throwing away people's hard work. But you've got to give the team the room to fail, and that failure evokes knowledge that they've gained that they can then build back up on. And I think this is a hard thing to manage because you get some of the people that don't understand the value of this and they want to hold on to their work. And we've had, people that have had throwaway large, we just did it actually a couple weeks ago, huge pieces of work that they've been working on for over a year. That's a hard thing to do, but you have to be able to know when it's time to say fail and throw it away. Again, I don't know how many of you are actually leading teams. This was, for me, kind of sharing a little bit of my soul in the sense of what leadership can be. It can be daunting as, it can be daunting as all hell. You're handling a lot of money, a lot of people, huge responsibility. And sometimes, you get caught up in so much of the detail and so much of the fragmentation of the product or team, you lose the big picture of what you're there to do, and it becomes overwhelming. So some of those slides I'm going to talk about here now are just, this is natural, I guess. For me it was, and I'm just sharing that if that's the way you're feeling about your product right now, it's kind of natural. Roll with it, get up the next day, do the same thing over again, and you'll continue to make progress. It can be a lot of juggling, multitasking, and adjusting. And I put an underline under adjusting here because I feel like you should never kind of put a stake in the ground, make a decision about how your team's going to operate, and keep it there. I think you should always be evaluating what that decision was and looking for more efficient ways to move through things. We had somebody managing, as a producer, kind of all the aspects of a level coming together. And she was doing very well at this, touching base with all the people. We've got about probably 15 people that are involved in, special effects and modeling and texturing and lighting and all the dynamics and riggings and all of that stuff that needs to happen. And she was doing really well, but I sit back and I watch what her day is and what she actually accomplishes. And she's simply the mouthpiece for all the creatives that are involved in the level building. And that's working, but for me, it's always about asking how efficient is it for that one person to be going back and forth and playing mouthpiece. So we shifted it up. Basically, it's kind of, getting all the group together and having them meet on a weekly or bi-weekly or possibly even daily routine of sitting down and discussing the level. Always looking at ways to be more efficient. Leadership can be lonely. So you're at the top a lot of the times. For me, what got me through this feeling is, again, who are you surrounding yourself with? Are these people that you trust? Can you confide in them? I think that's really important, not only in your personal life, but at work. People that you can lean on, basically. I was confused. It felt like the entire time of any sort of production I was on, feeling like walking in circles, not knowing what's up, what's down, and you're exhausted while you're doing that, in and out of crunches and crunch meals. But this is part of it, you know, and again, you just constantly have to corral and bring people together and try to get the most out of everybody. And there's times that you're full of fear. You don't know if you're going to make the day. You don't know if you're going to make the deadline, and there's so much writing on it. I mean, you know, you've got your publisher telling you it's absolutely catastrophic if you don't make this date. And you're looking at possibly the Christmas window, and it's shrinking, and manufacturing can't speed up the delivery of the discs, and it's scary. I don't know what to say about this one. Just have a drink. But you do need to surrender to the fear, you know, and there are many times that I remember Dave and I sitting in my office just going, holy shit, you know, we're really on the line here. We started Sony Santa Monica to build new IP, and that's what we were there for. And if you don't succeed at that, what's going to happen to you, not only what your passion is, but your livelihood, the studio that you were really hoping could be successful. And many times on God of War 1, we looked at each other and just, you know, thought the world was falling around us. But I think one of the things I really value about Dave is his consistent focus on, you know, what's best for the game and persevering through that and really pushing. And that causes a lot of problems for the people who are supporting him in the way that he pushes, but I think the end result speaks for itself. So you can work to get it right. You know, when it happens, it's a great feeling. You want to celebrate, right? And I hope we've all had that feeling once in our careers. And then you can sit back and dream once you get it right, right? It's all about money. Money's going to come in and flow, and you're going to not have to work again, right? All right, so that's a dream. But you do have something to celebrate. You've made a product. It's out in the world. I mean, that's huge. How many people in your life do you know that can really impact society that way? And you can celebrate with your team. Who's better than that to celebrate with outside of your family, of course? But sometimes it just doesn't work all that well. Production is extremely difficult. And are you going to jump ship? Is that going to be your plan? Well, I hope not. You're going to let a lot of people down and, you know, basically give up. And nobody wants to give up. So we all have productivity problems. I think it's pretty evident in the way that this industry rolls. There's issues all over the place that we collectively come together to try to clear up and fix. And there's things that we can't seem to get a handle on, like crunch time, and how do we get rid of that? So I was going to talk about productivity, not problems, but patterns today, and a little bit about the specifics of what I work to bring to the team and kind of my immediate influence on a team. Your patterns are really the foundation for, as a leader, building the culture of your discipline, your team, or your studio. And I think it's really important as a leader to sit back and think a little bit about those patterns and what you want them to be. For me, my patterns are my patterns. They're based off of my values, and they're built on my values. So as I go through this, I don't want you guys to think that I'm up here dictating to you what your patterns need to be. I'm simply going to share with you what I bring to work with me every day, and what I hope to instill in the team. And again, you know, I try to be perfect, but I'm not. And some of these things work, some of them don't. Every individual's different, so there's challenges not only at the team level, but at the individual level when I walk through what I'm talking about. So they're built on my values. They're never spoken. I don't sit down with somebody and talk about any of these productivity patterns. They're things that I do kind of under the hood. It's the way that I interface and say, hey, why don't you go talk to this person about this instead of complaining to me? And hopefully that inspires them next time to go, oh, well, maybe I should just go talk to the person. I can't tell you how many times I've had that crazy discussion, that one sentence. Well, have you talked to so-and-so about this? No. Well, why not? This is, this is the time to, if you're angry and you're upset, respectively, go have a word. Oh, okay. And they see me in the hallway the next day. Yeah, I talked to Stan, and he's going to change that thing that I told you about. Okay, so hopefully next time when this person has the issue, they're going to take it upon themselves to have that level of communication. So what I'm after is the highest productivity from a team. It's critical in the way that I look at the world of production. Productivity. And I'm not talking, productivity for me is happiness. And I think if you were to ask me, or if I had said that statement 10 years ago, I would have felt it was pretty cheesy. So maybe some of you think it is. But I'm not talking about free soda and movies and extra 2 weeks PTO after Christmas. I'm talking about, happiness at the level of a morale and how important that is to successful quality game production. And I do that through what I feel are the patterns. A productive team is a happy team. And I think you could also flip that around and say a happy team is a productive team. I've never seen a team that's not that's happy, that's not productive, right? So I don't know if I said that well enough, but I've never seen a team that's happy, that's not productive. So how do I go about attempting, and it's hard within Sony. There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of HR getting in the way of being able to run the studio the way we feel it should be run, supporting the creatives that are making multi-million-dollar products to keep the lights on within this organization. It blows my mind sometimes how difficult it is to treat people the way we feel we need to treat them. I could go off right now, but I won't. I'll stay on track. I can feel it brewing, but I was on the phone with HR on my way over here, and it's just like, oh my God, So for me, there's two different layers of productivity patterns. There's team patterns, and that's kind of what I've, as a producer, that's where I sit. It's that team pattern. What do I do on a daily basis, on an ongoing basis, consistently to support the team? And then as your team grows, or as possibly I grew in a new position, you got to be able to evaluate leadership potential. You can't do it all as a leader, right? So as your team grows, you need to start delegating. You need to start looking at who out there might be somebody that you can give a little more responsibility to and has leadership capabilities. So these are two different layers. I'm going to first start talking about team patterns. Productivity patterns for a team. For me, it's communication, collaboration, and compromise. There you go. Communication. So I think this happens at so many different levels, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on communication because we all know how important it is. But I think there's one thing that I'd like to point out, which is the improvised communication. I've been to development studios that are very stifled. If you're at work, you're sitting in your desk. It's kind of like my stepfather. If he was working, I was working. If he was raking leaves, I was raking leaves. So I'm going into a flashback right now. How can you be creative in that type of environment? How are you expecting to bring the best out of your individuals if you're demanding that they're at their desk working? So this improvised, we have a lot of guys that ride bikes at Sony Santa Monica. I don't know how this happened, but all of a sudden you start seeing all these bikes in the studio, and unfortunately there's been a few biking accidents that have slowed down production, and thank God, everyone's been okay. But so these guys, hang out and talk about their bikes. And, I've never, as a producer or as running a studio, asked them, hey, can you get back to work? We've got stuff to do, product to make. This is improvised. This is, for me, very healthy. These guys are connecting at a level that could be beneficial later on. There's also connection that happens in the kitchen. How you doing today? Oh, I got this problem in my code and this and that. Oh, would you try this? No, but I've tried that previously and it didn't work. Yeah, well, I did it the other day. The engine has this new support feature. And oh, really? Okay. How would that guy have known that without that little break over coffee? So we really want to work to enhance that sort of dynamic within the studio. It's great. I know of a studio that you can't listen to listen to music during your workday. And it's like, I just don't get that. For me, I could be very much in a bad mood, and a lot of times when I feel that way, grumpy after getting off the phone with HR, I can, put my music on, and it's going to change the dynamic of how I'm feeling in that moment. And for somebody to say no music at work, it doesn't make sense to me. Streamline communication. I think I actually already talked about the communication of the producer that was all over the place. So I kind of skipped ahead there with the person that was running the communication for the level and the group of people. So the streamlining and efficiency is really important in communication, constantly looking at ways that can be improved. So collaboration. This is, as I've mentioned, a pillar. We really like to bring in more than, we have somebody in the design group developing something that's maybe a feature within the game, and that person's maybe senior and they've got a ton of experience. Well, we don't want to end it there. We like to bring people in and get them to look at and critique and give feedback. And, what would we have done if we got a car out there with square wheels because nobody gave any feedback on the functionality of this isn't very, it's not going to work. We have technology come in, we do kind of a tech review. Designer comes up with a level design, and this is what I want to do. Well, let's sit down with an engineer and give that person an opportunity to give some feedback on how functional this level is for the engine. That sort of collaboration is really important. And what you want to work towards is a group of individuals that are constantly, hoeing and grooming and working together efficiently and effectively to come up with new ideas and inspire new thoughts, not only from within themselves, but from with each other. The more people you have doing that, out there searching for ideas or searching for solutions, the better off you're going to be. And if they can play off of each other in a collaborative fashion, it's all the more powerful. I think, there's, we all know, let's get the right group of people together to make good decisions and, build a dynamic that functions within a creative decision-making process. For me, this can change with just a single individual. I was managing a team years ago, and it was an art team that was in disorder. There was no real good management and no real vision for the art direction. No offense, but it was all guys. And we had an opportunity to bring a female from a different part of the company into that group. Her name was Al, of all names, not a guy, but a girl. And the guys were really against it. And it ended up where they had to choose between her and somebody that wasn't so good with art. So they ended up kind of being forced to bring this chick, Al, into their art group. And it was amazing to me. She, within probably 2 weeks, and I don't think she intentionally did it, but her personality within that group changed the entire dynamic of the way that group functioned. And it was offline meetings, again, hallway discussions, the way that she was communicating and bringing the team together. So when you think about a problem that you have or a feature that you need to build out, really take some time to think about who are the best individuals to sit into that meeting and drive it forward. And there's a strategy there for me of, this guy doesn't talk so much, but when he's around his friend Bill, Bill really inspires him to be a little more lively. Bill knows how to get this guy to offer what he has creatively, and that's what we want. We want everybody to have a voice. So when you put your creative heads together, think about the dynamic of the team that you're pulling together. At Santa Monica, we're a multidisciplinary problem solving. Like I've mentioned, we always bring in tech in and design, and if we've got some sound issues, we're going to bring the sound designer in. We want everybody to weigh in on these decisions, and it's really pivotal to moving things forward for us and finding compromise. This is talked a little bit about it earlier. This is really hard to do sometimes, but we're always working within compromise, whether it's time, money, technology limitations, people limitations, right? So if you can work to find compromise, it's not always easy. It's kind of sometimes makeshift. It's not all roses, but you know, it looks like Dave on the right, doesn't it? Sometimes it fails. You really work hard to get that communication going and that collaboration and the compromise, the tail end, things start coming together and they're just not aligned. That's okay. Again, we talked about failure and how important it is to allow failure in the creative development process. I think one of the things that for me is really important is there's no blame. Finger pointing in a creative development team is just not cool. Everyone's there contributing, so everyone should take responsibility for that failure. This sort of dynamic can really get, you know, it could be very detrimental. And the relationships that you've worked really hard to build, you start finger pointing, and it can really go to, you know, I won't say the word shit, I guess, whatever. So, so as I mentioned, as the team grows, it's really important to identify potential leaders. So this is kind of the next stage of, for me, the patterns that I use to look at who those people might be. And we want people to take on more responsibility and start to really look at various ways that they can connect to people, find the courage and the compassion on a day-to-day basis to really bring the best out of their team as a leader. So start with courage. This is something that can happen at a lot of different levels, and it's something that, you know, you don't think too much about at work, possibly. But courage is really critical when you're dealing with leadership, especially people that are willing to speak out, people that are willing to stand up and give a hard message, like, by the way, we're not going to meet this milestone with our art group. That takes a lot, right? I've been in that position multiple times, and you know, you got to think about how you're going to say it and what's the reaction, and you go through all this mental craze to figure out how you're going to come up with that. Well, who on your team is a really good representative that way? For me, I kind of watch that person and then identify with them and start to really get into the understanding the way they think a little bit more. People that are willing to, you know, do the unthinkable. And you know, we've had people that, we had an artist, he worked, I think, 3 months, if I'm not mistaken, on a level. And we had to tell him that the level wasn't going to make it in the game. And what I want to do is not have to be on the floor having all these difficult, courageous conversations all the time. I want to be able to figure out who within the team is capable of those types of communications and has the courage to actually go out there and sit down with their fellow employee and explain, here's what's going on and here's why, and really tap into how to best message that. I think that's really important. And that leads into connection, because part of that figuring out how to best message should shift based on who you're talking to. If you're talking to somebody that's very kind of, you know, matter of fact, this is the way it is, and hey, you know, I'll go back and do another level, no big deal, and you kind of know that personality, you're probably not going to have to be as soft with that person. If on the flip side you're dealing with somebody who's very emotional and very sensitive, you're going to probably want to take this person out for a beer and tell them, right? So I think taking that personality into account and connecting and really understanding the individuals that you're working with is really important as a leader who is identifying potential new leaders. Who is that person on the team that people go to when they have a problem? Who's that person on the team that people go to when they see and identify things that are going wrong? A lot of times teams are a bit hesitant to bring that up. They don't want to go to the producer because then they're the guy that, you know, is raising the red flag, and what does that mean for their future career? Well, who are they going to? And how can that person be more effective in their role as a leader? Bottom line is we're all connected. One person, you know, communicates effectively, we all benefit. One person doesn't. We oftentimes as a team all pay the price and, you know, have to stay late, crunch, or what have you to make up for the you know, faulty communication. Compassion. This is one for me where it's, you know, it's a little personal. I don't intend to stand up here and kind of go through multiple aspects of compassion. I think everybody has a certain level of compassion, or at least I hope. And I think you really need to decide in the workplace how much of that you want to bring in, because it can get, you know, in the way of making good, productive decisions as a manager. For me, it's really important, though. I care about everybody who works in the studio. I want the best for them. And I think it's oftentimes really important to kind of bring in what they're experiencing in their life, or at, you know, in their personal life or in their work, and get a real good understanding of what their challenges are. What can I do to hear what they're saying? Hearing is really important. You know, I've been in a lot of meetings where I've watched managers sit at a table, listen to somebody, but they're not really listening. They're just kind of distracted. They're on their BlackBerry while this other person's kind of pouring out their challenges working with so-and-so, or how their schedule's not going to work. And if you don't feel like you're being heard, you basically don't feel part of the team. So hearing people and really taking their issues to heart and working to problem solve, for me, is really critical. Going back up to that person and following up on that is also very important. Hey, I didn't forget about you. I know you came to me a week ago. If I see somebody in the hallway, you came to me a week ago. I haven't been able to get an answer, but believe me, it hasn't, you know, I haven't forgotten you. That means a lot to people, and it's kind of a respect thing. I work to have a respectful environment and have people respect one another, and therefore, for me, I've got to put it out there as well. So I think for compassion, there's an aspect of fighting for what I believe in, fighting for my team, what I think is right, and you know, working with the group to find the best balance possible with what's going to inspire them and kind of make them happy, but also productive. Because again, you can't have a happy team without having a productive team. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about team building. This is, for me, you know, a lot of times people feel like you build a team and it's done. And, you know, you've got your 30 people, your 35 people, and off you go, going to make a product. For me, this is never ending. This is constantly, you talked about adjusting earlier. Team building means you're always looking at the way the team's functioning. You're looking at the new features that your crazy game director's introducing to the game at the 11th hour. How are you going to effectively push that through? When you're team building, you're also bringing in new talent. What does that talent do to the mix? Talked about Al earlier. So there's a lot of different types of ways that team building changes, fluctuates, and for me, it's all about honing the team. Most effective, happiest team possible. Talked earlier, surround yourself by the right people, you can make it through it. It's really critical. You got to get those people that you can trust and communicate with. Have you ever been, you know, I've had, not had this happen very often, but people that you kind of communicate with, but you don't really understand what they're saying. You don't really connect with them. That's why the interview process is so critical. Have other people. You know, I oftentimes ask for favors. Hey, I'm getting ready to hire this person. I know you're not going to really work with them very much, but can you come in and interview them and just get your read on the person as a whole and how well they are as a communicator, or, you know, are they going to fit with the culture? Get feedback. Who cares about ego? Who cares about who's making the final decision? What you're trying to do is build the best for the team. Surround yourself by great people. Look how dedicated they are. They're still having their meeting in their little boat with sharks surrounding them. Once you got them, steer them right. You don't want to mislead them. You don't want to guide them down a path that they're going to be putting themselves in danger. Now, I won't even talk about crunch here, because I think, you know, as I made the slide, I was like, oh, God, crunch, that's exactly what we're asking them to do. I can't solve that problem. If anyone has ideas, I'd love to talk to you after this. Santa Monica is based on an open workplace philosophy, where it's basically a big room like this with a bunch of desks in it. We don't have any walls. We don't have any offices. We have some offices, but the creatives are, again, creatives, producers all the way to creative directors, are all out on the floor. Offices are for people that handle the yucky things like money or hiring, negotiating salaries, right? So that looks pretty, you know, where's the creative inspiration there? How do you get any sort of communication out of that group? We want people that are passionate, that are inspired, and bringing a creative energy to work every day. We want people that love their jobs. That's what we're constantly striving for. Believe me, look, I'm not sitting here saying Santa Monica's the happiest studio in the world. We're not. We've got challenges all over the place. But this is what we strive for. This is what I hope day to day, every leader on that floor is looking to achieve with their team. We also, we saw the guy before that was kind of ball and chain to the desk. This is dedication. We want people that are dedicated. We want people that want to go to work, that want to interface and interact and drive great decisions that make great product. So we're looking for people like this that, you know, can drive our productivities. I think another thing that's really critical, I've seen a lot of, you know, CEOs that you can't approach. They're, you know, they're kind of dry and they're not really connecting you to you as the creative. You're the person making the game. Why would you treat somebody or, you know, like a huge authority and everyone's scared of you? So keep this in mind as you flourish and continue to grow in your career. Be the best you can be. Don't pretend to be something that doesn't matter. The ego has to be checked at the door as far as I'm concerned. I think another really important part, and it's harder to do the higher up the chain you go, but check in and get a pulse of how people are feeling. What are their responses to various decisions that are being made? And this is happening a lot right now with Santa Monica. Again, HR's involving themselves a lot more in what we do because our studio is getting bigger. And there's pros and cons to that. But for me, I want to kind of understand how the old-time employees feel about it and help them understand that this is part of growth. And not just leave it, not just have them walking around with an unhappy face. I'd like to see more smiles than unhappy. And a lot of times all it takes is a conversation to explain to them that there's some reasons why we're going down this road. And believe it or not, you'll find people that'll start to support it. Not only support it, but communicate it throughout their group so other people start to understand. That's that communication piece, right? The collaboration that we want to find in our workplace. Top talent, I think everybody in this room knows how crazy the market is right now. Damn Zynga. So, anybody hear that? Damn Zynga. Identify that top talent. There's a lot of fish out there. You know, get them in. Bring them in. You know, I think the other thing you see, politics kind of sometimes gets in the way of being able to get top talent in because people feel like, oh, get somebody in that's smarter than me, which is not the case. We're not talking about who's smarter. We're talking about somebody else that can contribute and round out that team. Push for this. You may not have the people that, you know, feel comfortable, but your job is to integrate these people and get them to work at the best, you know, most effective, efficient level possible. This is a challenge day to day because you're typically dealing with top-tier talent. Those top-tier talents are the guys that you want to identify as star performers. Every culture has a different way of doing this. Honestly, we're not so good at it right now in Santa Monica. I want to improve this. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Make the people feel involved and proud of what they do. Showcase them a little bit. Some way that's not goofy, it's not cheesy, but in a way that they can feel like, yeah, I did contribute, and look at what I've done, and it makes them want to come in, you know, extra early on a Monday. Talked a little bit about this, but we've got people in Sony Santa Monica that have been there for, you know, over 10 years. You want to retain those people that you've poured so much knowledge in. It's a knowledge base, keep in mind. You're not just losing a person that's a workhorse, but you have a cultural knowledge base. It's kind of unspoken. You can't really teach that per se. It's something that they understand and they actually contribute to. You lose top talent. You're losing the ability for that person to contribute to your AAA product, but you're also losing somebody that has contributed to many things through the course of many years. So keep that in mind too when you're trying to negotiate keeping somebody around or simply trying to give somebody a raise. Think about the recruiting fees and the stress that you're going to go through trying to backfill a position. And what can you do to make sure that that individual is going to stick around? Once you get them, keep them happy. Again, happy comes up. You got this mundane workforce at the top being put through to the Santa Monica studio, I want to say factory, but that's a bad word. But they get kind of pooped out here in a flower garden. So they're happy. You know, that's what we want to see every day, is what's happening at the bottom there. Happy people that can create product that stands out in the industry. We're all in this together. Pretty self-explanatory. So this is the productivity patterns, and it all kind of, for me, all works in this crazy, you know, chaotic fashion. These are all the things that I'm constantly looking for. How well are we communicating? How well are we collaborating? Are we finding compromise as we go through those communications and the collaborations? That's at that team level. It's all about, you know, the team building and the leadership. It's all happening at the same time. And then while that is happening at the team level, I'm looking at who's standout, who's that star performer? Does that star performer have the ability to communicate? Is he really succeeding at this top tier here? And then does he have courage? Is he able to get up in front of people and talk? Or does he have the ability to send those difficult messages in a very soft fashion? Is he connecting with his team, or is he the guy that's out at 5:30 and he doesn't really socialize with the crew? That's not a mandate, but that's something I'm looking at. And then the compassion, again, that's kind of, everybody has their own sensibility there, but does it work for the team? Are these people approachable? Are they people that really connect and can find what makes that individual tick as a leader? So I was asked by somebody who looked at these slides, if I were to sum up everything here in what I call my 6 C's, what would be the one word? And it's like, oh, that's tough. That's 6 big words and a bunch of, you know, hour-long discussion. And I said, you know what? It's happy. And again, it sounds cheesy, but it's not. If you got happy people, you will find that you will be productive. So productive team is a happy team. I think really what I'm trying to do here is inspire you to go off and really take some time to self-reflect and think about, what are your productivity patterns? What do you bring to your team or your studio or your discipline every day? Think about that and use that as kind of pillars for the way that you are going to interface with your group and get the most out of them. They're going to start to identify those pillars with you, and inevitably what you're going to do is kind of infuse that within them. And ultimately, you're going to start to build a culture. You're not going to need to talk about it. You're not going to need to write it down anywhere. I remember at EA, they had all these "be proud" and signs up all over the walls. It's like, what? You're going to tell me how to build, you know, how to be here as an individual? It doesn't make sense. You want to, for me, you know, I want to do that underground. I want to do it under the hood. And I'm hoping today that this will give a little more inspiration to think about who you are as an individual. What are your values? What can you build on from your values to create your productivity patterns? So all my little friends say goodbye and they thank you. And then I was going to see if anyone had questions.